Live from the KXLY4 HD Broadcast Center with the only local news at 6:30. You're watching KXLY4 HD News.
There are stories we cover every night that simply air, then go away. But there are others that never leave us, no matter how much time has passed.
A little more than 5 years ago, this was one of those stories. A rainy November night, 2 mangled trucks and 5 children killed in an instant. The community rallied and prayed for their parents, Jeff and Carolyn Schrock. Then we moved on with our lives.
KXLY4's Melissa Luck spoke with Jeff and Carolyn last week. Melissa, time has changed a lot of things for this family over the last many years, but some things you just can't move on from.
Yeah, sadly, I've covered a lot of crashes in my life, but I know this is one that will always stay with me. I will never forget standing on the side of the road that November night, knowing that 5 children were dead just a few feet away. But what sticks with many of us the most is how Jeff and Carolyn Schrock responded to that crash with faith and forgiveness. 5 years later, their faith has only grown, but we learn acceptance isn't always so easy. Walking into the Bread Box Bakery in Chewelah.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Is like walking into someone's living room.
How are you doing this morning?
Owners Jeff and Carolyn Schrock greet customers, stack shelves, and carry out one simple mission.
I mean, we put on our sign, home-baked goodness, and it's maybe a little bit of a corny way of saying it, but that's kind of what we're trying to portray.
And if home is where your story begins, for the Schrocks, this is where it almost ended.
I remember seeing the truck coming up out of the median, and I remember trying to steer away from it. And that's, you know, past that, memories get real fuzzy.
The story by now you probably know. A wrong-way driver crossed through this median not once, but twice. The second time, it ended in a 4-ton pile of twisted metal and shattered glass. 2 trucks, one almost unrecognizable. And when the smoke cleared, a frightening reality too difficult for most of us to imagine. Jeff was alive but severely injured. He had broken bones from head to toe. He almost bled to death in the hospital that night. Carolyn got the call, but was only told that Jeff crashed his truck. As she headed to the hospital, a friend called 911.
The driver had 5 children with him, and she's wanting to know where her children are. Do you know?
No one had the heart yet to tell Carolyn the truth. Carmen, Jana, Karina, Gerald, and 2-year-old Craig, all 5 of her children, dead. A family wiped out in the blink of an eye.
The reality of what you don't have, just becomes really real to you.
In the wake of the crash, the world, it seems, put their arms around the Schrocks. Their Mennonite community pulled them in while the community reached out, holding fundraisers and prayer vigils to remember the children and make sure Jeff and Carolyn had everything they needed. And those who heard their story could not help but be astounded by their faith, their strength, and especially their forgiveness. This sign went up at the crash site over the crosses that bore the children's names. Forgiveness for all. And Carolyn and Jeff led the way.
As a Christian, I recognize that forgiveness is the only way that I can be a Christian. And in return for that, forgiveness is required of me. And so in that sense, I don't have a choice.
They implored us all to forgive this man, Clifford Helm. He was driving the other truck that November night. Original theories ranged from cell phone distraction to a suicide mission. In court, Helm's lawyers told the jury he had a coughing fit and blacked out. Before their children were even buried, Carolyn and Jeff visited Helm in the hospital. And when he was found not guilty on vehicular homicide charges, the Schrocks stood by his side, while many of us looked on in disbelief.
We personally believe that Cliff was as much of a victim in this as what we were. I mean, it was, outside of his control.
5 years later, that bond remains strong. The 2 families have dinners together. They consider each other close friends. How in the world do they do it? The Schrocks say, simply, faith.
In a human way, it's hard to understand that, but it's the way we believe that God has designed it.
5 years later, in their new bakery, the laughter of children greets customers. 2 Schrock children at whom you can't help but smile. Jolynn was born 6 weeks after the crash that took her brothers and sisters.
Someone is calling for you, Mr. Lucy.
3-year-old Carl came next. They're as much of a draw here as the sweet rolls.
one that comes in here often, and she doesn't really buy that much, but she comes in every week just to see the children.
A living, breathing, laughing sign that life marches on. But despite new beginnings, you can never escape the past.
They know that our children were the same age as some of our friends, as families, and they know that they don't have those big sisters and brothers, and yeah, so they have to accept it too, and we just try to help them accept it just like we do.
Acceptance, they explain, is not a one-time act, but a constant challenge no matter how deep your faith. Their oldest child would be almost 18 by now. Those milestones, prayer and time, cannot erase.
For my wife, for some reason, the 5-year anniversary was a hard time. And, you know, why? I don't know. You know, 2 years wasn't as hard as 5 years in some ways.
I mean, I cried a lot. I mean, I just would get teary over it lots, and I don't know. You just have to, pray and ask God to help you to just accept it again. And that's what happens a lot in your life, is you just have to keep saying, I accept your will in my life. And it's not easy.
But this bakery in many ways has helped the healing process. They've met people in this community who know their story, and now they know that support did not end when the crosses came down off this road.
We look back on it as being very supported, and you know, that is how it was this year when it was so hard for me. I felt so supported and loved all over again. That's one thing that's been neat about, that I like when people talk to us here at the bakery, is they'll say, oh, that's you. Well, we've been praying for you for a long time. And then we get to say, you know, thank him for that.
Does time erase these wounds? Of course not. How could it really? But it does change the way you grieve and make you celebrate the new gifts in your life. Forgiveness helps and heals, and faith can bring you home.
Of course we're real. Of course we cry. Of course it's hard. But still, by God's grace, you can do it, and He can give you peace and actually joy.
And going back over this interview, I realized the word I heard most often was grace. People tell them all the time, how can you do it? I could never get through this. Carolyn says God gives you grace that you need in your life. He does not give grace to the onlooker. As for Clifford Helm, we talked to him. He did not want to go on camera. He says his family is still very much healing for this. He says God is very much in their lives, but he says that he has a long way to go, and he is grateful to have the Schrocks in his life.
Yeah, I would have liked to have heard from him, but I'm glad that he was able to make a statement to everybody else.
It's one of those stories that you want a good and evil. You want a good and bad, and a villain and a hero. And in this story, there's no villain and there's no hero. There's faith. And I think we learned that they're not blinded by their faith. Mm-hmm. They're human beings, but that just helps guide them through what is an excruciating process.
It's one of those stories that we will all think about over and over in how we live our daily lives, and we're the onlookers. And it's because for me, having my own children, I just don't know.
Yeah, you see those kids though in person, and they are adorable. And
they are adorable.
And check out their bakery in Chewelah. There's my plug for them, because oh my goodness.
Yeah, you couldn't stop raving about it.
It's incredible and great people, and you just feel a great sense of warmth when you go there as well.
It's nice to see them again.
I want to strengthen that family.
You can see the whole story again online right now. You can also see some of the raw interviews with Jeff and Carolyn. We could not include it all, so you can do that right now on our website, KXLY.com.